What a lovely AI-generated fire. Hello! Welcome to Salty Productions' Top 5 Underrated Cards for Commander series. Today I will be taking you through 5 different cards that I think you all should be playing more in your Commander decks. And of course we will be focusing this list around the 7 or 8 power level out of 10, or I suppose with the new bracket system, the 3 bracket? Not really sure how that will all work out here, but I just wanted to take you guys through 5 underrated cards. We'll go through Wooburg order, and before we get into it, I'd just like to ask if you enjoy this content, leave a like on the video and subscribe as we jump into our first white card from Salty Productions. This is Riot Control. Riot Control is a 3-mana instant that says you gain 1 life for each creature your opponents control. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to you this turn. Now, in white, clearly the best fog in the meta is Teferi's Protection. I don't think anybody can dispute that. And I think that most decks only run perhaps 1 additional slot for a fog or some sort of protection spell against combat. And that is often taken up by Clever Concealment as well, which is also great for board protection. However, Riot Control, I have found, is an incredible life point swing because not only does it prevent all damage that will be dealt to you this turn, which can save your life, and if we consider that life gain by looking at it as damage we would have taken anyway, often when you cast this, you are probably going to be taking upwards of 15 to 20 damage. Typically, you wouldn't be casting this if it was even 10 damage to let through, for example, because 10 damage isn't even that much to get going in Commander. Also, I will note that the specific text says prevent all damage that would be dealt to you this turn. So if you cast this at the top of a Sir Conrad giant stack of activations, or triggers rather, you can also prevent yourself from non-combat damage being dealt if somebody is going to snap off like a Jaya's Immolating Inferno or something crazy like that. The other half of this card is gaining 1 life for each creature your opponents control, which, if you will notice, if you take we'll say broad sample of gameplay by turn 5 or 6, which is when you might be holding this up, perhaps turn 7, your opponents will probably have on average between 10 to 15 creatures on board between all of them. Typically you'll have at least 3 creatures base case for most opponents within casual Commander. So I think that this card is an excellent include as a protection piece for any deck that is running white, and I think this should be a high consideration for a fog effect. If you're tired of seeing so many Teferi's Protections and you're too scared to run Perch Protection, we'll give Riot Control a look, and I promise you will like seeing this in your hand. My next pick here in blue is going to not be recommended for any generic deck running blue, but instead for any Spellslinger type of deck that is running blue that cares about having creatures on board. So a little bit more of a narrow archetype. This is Candlekeep Inspiration, which is a 5-mana sorcery. Until end of turn, creatures you control have base power and toughness XX, where X is the number of cards you own in exile and in your graveyard that are instant cards, are sorcery cards, and or have an adventure. The cool part about this is it's a great option for Spellslinger decks as an overrun effect, giving your creatures probably at least base power and toughness 7/7. I think this is a slam dunk in those Spellslinger decks like Stella Lee or perhaps Veyran that are going to have a ton of 1-mana instant and sorcery cantrips sitting in the graveyard. And the cool part about this as well is that it cares about the number of cards in exile as well. So if your graveyard gets exiled from a random Bajuka Bog or something like that, you can absolutely have this card still work. And I guess bonus points if you are playing in a very adventure-heavy deck, which is very narrow, but very cool nonetheless. So Candlekeep Inspiration, great pick as an overrun. Now, it doesn't give evasion, but I find that if your opponents are forced to block because you're presenting a lethal board state, that's going to lead to them sacrificing their non-token creatures to block, and so I think that's still worth it either way, even if you don't have the built-in evasion. But often, if you're running like a Veyran Voice of Duality deck, you'll have something like a Slip Through Space or anything that can give it unblockable to help pump up your team. Or if you're just running blue flyers, I think this would be great as well. Any sort of a Spellslinger deck that already has these evasive flyers ready to go. But even without evasion, I think this is a great overrun pick in blue. Next up, are you tired of getting overran by just a ton of tokens that your friends are spewing onto the battlefield and then slamming a Jetmir Nexus of Revels? Well, boy, do I have the pick for you. This is Netherborn Phalanx, 6 mana, 2/4 creature horror. When it comes into play, each opponent loses 1 life for each creature he or she controls. And importantly, this has transmute for a total of 3 mana, 1 and 2 black. You can pay the 3, discard the card to search your library for a card with the same CMC as this card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. So you can go find a 6-drop. This is one of those cards that will never be dead in your hand. Once again, this scales great with your opponents if you're on the back heel, where you are defending against just a giant overrun board of tokens. You know, your Avenger of Zendikars are very popular. Adeline Resplendent Cathar is a very popular commander as well. Tokens are just a very common archetype that you will see, and this punishes your opponents for going wide. Also, bonus points, you can combo this up with something like a Wound Reflection or Bloodletter of Aclazot, which is what I'm doing in a new Orzhov brew that I am currently working on, which I will make a video about very soon. But also, we can pay 3 to search for a 6-drop, and what are the great 6-drops that we maybe want to find in Commander? You've got your Bolas's Citadel, you've got Rishkar's Expertise, Selvala's Stampede if you're in green. You can tell I play more green than anything else because the examples off the top of my head are green. But you also have your Consecrated Sphinx within blue, Sun Titan in white. So very powerful 6-drops are available to be searched up with a Netherborn Phalanx. And I think that this could fit in most generic decks, but I think that you would probably also want to be considering your meta as well. If you happen to be in a heavy Spellslinger meta, maybe don't run this card so much, but I think in your average table that you might find at like a Magicon, people are going to be playing creatures. Commander just in general is a very creature-heavy format, and this will get you a ton of value. I would say on average, this will probably lose your opponents between 3 to 4 life, but the ceiling would be, especially knowing Commander, how people like to absolutely pop off, spewing a bunch of creatures on the field if they're Simic or whatever. You know, this could net you up to 20 damage on a single opponent if they have already popped off. So great pick here with Netherborn Phalanx. Now our next pick here is a vegetables card, and I think this is one of the best vegetable cards in red that has been printed that absolutely nobody remembers and has forgotten about. This is from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, Highway Robbery, 2 mana sorcery. You may discard a card or sacrifice a land. If you do, draw 2 cards. Sounds familiar, right? What makes this unique is it has plot. For 2 mana, you may pay the 2 mana and exile this card from your hand, cast it as a sorcery on a later turn without paying its mana cost, plot only as a sorcery. Now, imagine this. You are on turn 2, you're a graveyard deck, and you want to be discarding perhaps an artifact or perhaps even a land if you're in like a Lord Windgrace type of deck into the graveyard. You can cast this on 2 and then draw your 2 cards and go about your day, having been totally happy to put a resource into your graveyard and drawn 2 cards. Also picture though, that same game, let's say we did not cast this and instead we plotted it. Now we are top deck mode because we are playing red, of course, and red runs out of steam eventually. Would you be willing to top deck a mountain and immediately discard that to draw 2 cards and pay 0 mana? And that's why this card is great. You can plot the mana up front when it's not even going to matter, and then as soon as you want to start storming off, you can then immediately for 0 mana on that turn that you want to be storming off, fill your graveyard with that discard effect, or let's say we actually don't have a card to discard, we are actually hellbent, right? If we're in like some sort of a discard deck, we can sacrifice that land and give up that land resource to then draw 2 cards if we absolutely need to look for like a Swords to Plowshares to cast on like an attacking Blightsteel Colossus, for example. Now that's a little bit of Magical Christmas Land, but the point is that in the late game, turn 6-7, when there's clearly somebody about to win and you're on that back foot and you might have only 1 or 2 turns left, would you pay that land, which you can tap, by the way, to help, you could just float the mana, to then draw those 2 cards and look for an answer? And I think I would absolutely be willing to do that. So Highway Robbery, great vegetable card in red. And my final underrated pick here in green is Pygmy Kavu. Now this is a 4-mana 1/2 creature Kavu. When it enters, draw a card for each black creature your opponents control. So a little bit of color hate here, but I think that of all the colors to hate on, black is actually the best. I believe that black is indeed the most popular color that you might see in Commander. Of the top 50 commanders in the past 2 years on EDH black is in 32 of those commanders color identities, and many of those are very creature heavy, and especially in aristocrats you'll find a lot of tokens. So while meta dependent, I think that Pygmy Kavu's average case is to draw probably about 3 or 4 cards, and I view this as a 4-mana draw 4 in Commander that's on a creature body. Now I think that this has a much higher ceiling than that, and there are games that you will find that you are not playing against any black opponents. However, black in general is one of the most powerful colors in Commander because of its capacity to tutor. In casual Commander, this has the possibility to draw you, I would say, up to about 10 cards, but the average case would probably be between 3 and 4, and very rarely, I say, would this not draw you any cards. But again, the strength of this card is that you can reanimate it, and it is a stick that can be used to block things, sacrificed, etc. So Pygmy Kavu, definitely a great pick if you're looking to draw cards within the green color, as long as your opponents play black. So that's it for my 5 underrated cards as of October 2024. Let me know if you guys enjoy this type of card discussion. I'd be happy to make this into a new series, and we can keep bringing back this lovely background that I actually really like, even though it's AI generated and, you know, people don't necessarily like the AI generated art. I think it puts a very cozy mood into the video, so big fan of that. Anyway, that's the video, guys. Once again, if you enjoyed it, leave a like on the video and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Let me know if you want to see more discussions like this in the comments as well. And this is where I'll wrap up the video. Thank you all for watching once again, and hopefully we'll see you all in the next one.